Good evening and welcome. I'm Kathy Hawks. I'm the Associate Dean for External Relations here at Sloan, and I'm joined by my fabulous colleagues here tonight. Welcome to this amazing reception. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know I'm standing between you and the talk that you've all come to hear, which I am very much looking forward to. And I could do the long version of the bio, but I'll do the brief version of the bio tonight for our dear friend, Professor Roberto Rigobon, who is the Sloan Fellows Professor of Management and Professor of Applied Economics here at MIT Sloan. He's been here teaching for over 20 years and also has a PhD from MIT in 1997. He has an amazing wife and 3 children, 2 of which are graduates at MIT. And he has been our incredible partner around the world, working with external relations and global programs in Latin America, in Thailand, and in India, and is a fan favorite at Reunion. So tonight you will hear about his second most downloaded paper ever. So it is an exciting time to be here. I hope you'll all join me in welcoming Roberto Rigobon.
Yes. So the second most downloaded paper has only 5 downloads. Yes, I found. So it's just like, it's not. I mean, that is a very low standard. But thank you so much. Yes. Yes. So thanks so much for being here. It's great to see some of my former students, and it's a great build. Thank you so much for making it. What I would like to do is mostly to have a conversation. So I will try to run over some of the things that we are finding on this paper. It's called Aggregate Confusion, and mostly it's trying to highlight the fact that we have no clue where we are and where we are going. Okay, that's it. But I think that if I put the title of the paper like that, it will be really hard to get it published. It will make good for a book that you can sell in a train station, but yeah, especially with Amtrak, you really don't know where you are going. But except for that, so what I want to do is to show you a little bit. So I am absolutely and completely obsessed with measurement. Let me just start with a confession. And the most important reason why I'm so obsessed is because I think we do a horrible job at measuring in general. In fact, we don't measure, for example, the quality of our relationship. We don't. We wait until they break up. We don't measure, for example, sadness, ever. We wait until a person is diagnosed with depression or commits a suicide. We don't measure, for example, social unrest of a country. We don't. We wait until they start in the streets rioting. And when you think about it, what just happened in Chile, they increased the cost of the metro, the T, by 3%, 3.15%. How is possible, if you think about it, how is possible that 3.15% will lead you from 0 to 100? And now you have 1.5 million people protesting. Well, it's not because it's the 3.15. It's that you just measured so badly you didn't know the society was incredibly upset. And then the 3.15 is what broke that barrier. So this is an example of the bad measurement. By the way, usually what happens, in the case of Chile, it happens it's so sad because every time I give this talk, I have a different country and a different example, and I give these talks 4 times a week. Like, you have to be kidding me. And now, every Thursday is France, because in France, they're always upset. They're always complaining and whining. So I know that if I give this on a Thursday, there will be some French complaining about something really stupid. But truly, when you think about it, after this happens, then they start looking backward. They said, oh, yes, the salaries are too low. Yes, the people are excluded. Yes, the education system was wrong. I mean, couldn't you have done at least that homework before? Do you need to actually wait until the riot? Human rights violations, we don't measure human rights violations. We don't. We wait until people are in massive exodus, okay? And by the way, that is not enough. We have to be outraged. For example, the case of Syria is a very good example. People were under massive human rights violations in Syria, and we were not paying attention that much. And then what happened is we find this little boy a baby boy that is dead in one of the shores in Greece. The whole world gets outraged, and now we measure, and in fact, it is reported, I don't know if you remember, that was about 5 years ago, they are reporting every single week, every single day, the number of people that are in those boats that are dying in the middle of the Mediterranean. Have you heard about any person dying escaping from Syria lately? And again, it's just we're not paying attention. According to the statistical office in Europe, actually there are more people dying today than 3 years ago. But we are not outraged. It is difficult for the media to keep the attention, and therefore we are not paying attention. So to me, the fact that humankind has made good decisions the last 5,000 years is mostly the outcome of luck, not of wisdom. Okay? So to me, I want to try to understand how to measure better. And I think it's a first order issue, okay? And I work on the worst of humankind. I will show you just a list of things. But my wife says that I'm extremely happy because every day in my research, I actually am exposed to the worst of humans. And it's true, I realize how extraordinarily lucky I am. And so let me just show you what we have done, okay? I will show you no horror stories. Is that okay? No horrors, no, nothing like that. So what are the things that we measure incorrectly? So we tend to measure very late. What I mean by late is that in a process of deterioration, in a process of hostility, for example, I will actually have an example of women empowerment, but in a process of hostility, in a process of deterioration, what happens is that you start violating human rights a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and it just happens to be that when you reach that point, that breaking point, that's when you observe. That's what I mean by measuring too late. We measure extreme events. For example, we don't measure consumption of drugs in the city of Boston. We count how many people either die or enter the emergency room. Well, that by construction is an extreme outcome. And I do remember the district attorney of New York, he was very happy because the number of people that had died has come down. And they said, wow, we're doing a great job. I said, no. You just have a drug now that saves people. And because you only measure them when they're dead, and now you have the drug in every 7-Eleven, then you don't see them. So, in fact, there are more consumption, not less consumption. So, we measure very infrequently. It's almost like what happened when I go to the doctor, okay? I have been going to the same doctor for 22 years. Her name is Elaine. Actually, it took 15 years of a lot of interactions, and she doing to me things that not a single woman has ever done to me. And even though in those circumstances, she was never called me Roberto, okay? It took a long time for her to open up, okay? But you know, every time I go to the doctor, she says, Roberto, yeah, you are 1 year older. I said, okay. That's a good piece of information. Then second, she says, and you are losing a lot of hair. Yeah, okay. That's another very good piece of information. And then she says, and you weigh half a pound more than last year. And then I always ask her, like, Elaine, can you explain me how calling me uglier, fatter, older, somehow is going to motivate me to eat more broccoli? I will just grab a kale salad when I get out of here out of shame, but not truly because you have convinced me to change my behavior. So when you measure very infrequently, it's almost always an act of regret. So when we measure, by the way, this happens a lot to health. A lot of the health. So that's why we emphasize prevention. Prevention is to try to capture those gray areas of sickness way before it becomes regret. The same happens in all of these variables, like personal relationships and the state of the government and the quality of political system, etc. So that's one of my preferred ones right now, is the quality of a political system, the quality of political discussion. How did we got where we are today? How did we get here? This is completely and absolutely unacceptable. in fact, don't you want to resample the candidates? Like, give me anyone that has at least more than 2 neurons. They both have only 2 neurons. Let's try with someone that has 3. Let's, 50% more, we maybe actually make better decisions. This is a horrible environment of extreme amount of hate. They only tell us what they want to destroy about each other. They don't tell us what country they want to build. And how did we get to this place? We just don't know. We just realize when we have 2 very bad candidates or 2 very bad extreme positions. By the way, the only 2 countries on earth that have these very extreme positions, both on the left and the right, are Italy and the United States. That means that we are not in good company, just to clarify. Being with Italy in this case is a really bad company. The issue that I said about the media is about perception. Most of our measurements come from the media, or our reaction as consumers come from the media. That's the example of the Syrian. Is that okay? But talking about women empowerment or sexual harassment, if you think about it, about 80 years ago, most of the cases were in the military. It's so long ago that you maybe have forgotten. But most of the cases of sexual harassment were in the military. Then were colleges. Then 2 years later was Hollywood. Then recently now it's on the financial sector. So have you heard of any sexual harassment cases in the military the last 6 months? Well, two options. We either solve it or we are not paying attention. Or both. But to solve the issues of discrimination, issues of racism, of bad behavior, dishonesty, lack of integrity, we cannot solve this if we only pay attention during the weekends. I mean, we have no chance of solving that. Then, lastly, we tend to concentrate on statistics that might be meaningful in some dimension, but they create a false sense of accomplishment. Let me explain. One thing that we do all the time in organizations is we count women. Is that okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, we have 40% here. Yes! Oh my God, we did a good job. Woohoo! Yes! Okay, so why do we get so happy about that? Well, because if you have 0% women in management, that tells me a lot about the quality of the management of that organization, okay? So that means that clearly you are kind of not doing your job. But when you move the percentage of women from 30 to 40, from 40 to 50, well, the question is, when you get to 50, the question is, okay, you have half of them, but are you treating them better? Are you paying attention? Do they have actually the possibility to talk? So the fact that you reach 50 doesn't say anything about treatment. So almost every statistic, think about it, almost every statistic that we compute in the world that has anything to do with social issues, they are late, they are infrequent, they are very driven by the perception of how outraged the society is, and they tend to oversimplify the problem, concentrate in one statistics, and you are done. That's the example of the opioid crisis with the number of people that are dead. It's the wrong statistic. It should be about consumption of opioids, not about the number of people that enter the emergency room. I understand that one is super simple to compute, the other one is extremely hard. But therefore, by the way, use both, okay? Now, when I started this, I thought this was going to be a 3 months research. I thought, 3 months, I destroyed the whole literature, and then, I thought, this is going to be so easy. Plus, of course, I'm a genius, okay? What do you can expect? This is going to be so easy. It's just so boring, okay? So, in fact, I was working more on my imitation of Donald Trump, so a Latino Trump, than actually working on this, because I thought, why waste my time on research when this is too easy, okay? So 3 years later, let me just tell you a little bit what we have. So what we did first, I talked to all the rating agencies, and I asked the rating agencies, please, can you give me your raw data? So, and in fact, I told them, I'm going to get your data about how you evaluate ethical behavior. Rating agencies that actually do ESG, the purpose is to try to measure ethical behavior. So if you're destroying the environment, well, that's bad. If you're treating your workers badly, that's bad. If you are discriminate, that's bad. If you produce electromagnetic field pollution, that's bad. So when you think about it broadly, ESG is truly to measure ethical behavior of firms, okay? And in fact, I want to change the name because ESG is environment, social, and governance, and I understand that it's a good way to organize the data, but when you think about it, this saying, I want to measure how ethical the companies are, it changes the narrative. It's about, well, the products that I produce, what is the negative consequences they have. So when I produce mac and cheese, and that is super unhealthy, kind of kills people, will I be, somehow compensated by the fact that I also produce cigarettes that kills people but way slower, okay? So does the fact that I kill, so the fact that I am diversifying the killing, does that make my life better, okay? So well, when you think about it, maybe the answer should be yes, but in some sense, what we did, I told them, I'm going to get your data, and I'm going to show the tremendous discrepancy that exists in your data, okay? And I have no idea why these companies suddenly decided to start to share their data, even though I told them that I was going to publish that their data was rubbish. Okay, in fact, some of them said, oh, we will not give you our data. Said, well, what if I buy the data? We will not sell you our data. We will protect ourselves from you, miserable bastard. I said, okay, don't worry. There was one company like actually said that, okay? Said, we will never give you our data. I said, no problem at all. And so I wrote the paper first with the other big data players, and I put the first footnote said, I requested the data from X, and they decided not to share it. That was the first footnote. And I sent the paper to them, and I said, well, I have to say that because if I don't request your data, I will look like a loser. I prefer to look like a bastard than a loser, okay? So if I given the choices, a heartless bastard looks way better than an idiot loser, okay? So, oh my God, that was beautiful. I sent them the paper and said, we are willing to sign an NDA. I said, oh, you want to be in the study. Because the implication of the footnote is that their data was totally, completely rubbish, okay? And indeed, we have to write, actually, we have written this paper 3 times. Because we get the data, and then one said, oh, no, we want to be included. Please don't publish the paper. And then we get it. So we're getting the data by drippings. And so we have 8 now. So you can see there are 5, but we have 8. So we actually have 8 data sources. I think we have 8 of the top 8. So the top, and they open up entirely. So they have told us every single detail how they measure the rating. This is the ranking of the total rating. In a second, I will explain how it's done, but this is, for example, the score. So this will be the score of MIT, for example, the score of the Massachusetts Environmental Agency. This is the score of the whole industry. What we have done is take, these are some of the biggest rating agencies. So Sustainalytics, Robeco-San, this is Thomson Reuters, the MSCI, and Vigeo, okay? So these are very, very big international ones. And what we have done here is I have looked at the companies that are common to all of them that have very similar rating. So as you can tell, there are some companies that are really bad, some companies that are really good, okay? And they tend to agree. Is that clear? So even if you wanted to do what McKinsey does, which is to make a zoom and then scream, look at the discrepancy. No, don't worry. I mean, they truly, okay, they truly are very close to each other. Is that okay? I mean, McKinsey will say, let's do a zoom here. And then they do a zoom and look how big the circle is, okay? Okay, so, but we are not McKinsey here, so we don't have to fake it. Is that okay? But these are the companies where there's the strongest agreement. These are the companies where is the strongest disagreement. So, for example, in Intel Corporation, according to MSCI, that's a bottom 15 company, bottom 15% company, and for the other 4 rating agencies, it's a top 10% company. Intel. It's not like it's a completely unknown company. I don't know if you have noticed, but do you know Intel? Have you heard about it? like a pum, 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 that's a company. Okay. Then, Applied Materials. Have you heard about Applied Materials? So the fact that they're public doesn't mean that they're properly evaluated. Is that clear? There's a tremendous discrepancy. By the way, this is on the bottom 10. This is Sony Corporation, bottom 5% for MSCI. Bottom 5%. So Sony sucks. This is the lemma in MSCI. Everybody else kind of likes Sony. Massive. We have to organize this in such a way that you can see it. So we organize it by one of the middle guys, but it's a massive dispersion on this. So what we did was to try to understand why we have dispersion. We organize attributes. So these are the things that matter. For example, how you treat workers, okay? So now how you treat workers, it's hard to understand how do you measure that. Now there could be two different types of measurements. I can measure, for example, turnover, how many of them I can retain, or I can measure, for example, labor court complaints, okay? So, by the way, different cultures, different countries will have different reflections. For example, in the United States, very rarely you will go to a labor court and file a complaint. It has to be a massive level of abuse. And the reason is that in the United States, it's almost like a lifetime stigma if you went to a labor court. You're unhireable, okay? So in the US, we quit. Most of what happens is we tend to quit. In France, people never quit. If you quit, you will never find a job ever again. Is that okay? So you prefer to be killed before you quit. It's absolutely clear. So in France, this is true, I'm telling you. In France, they complain every Thursday. That's what they do. They whine like crazy. Is that okay? And in fact, they whine while they drink wine. So just it's perfect for them. So you see, the fact turnover and labor court complaints are correlated, but they are not the same thing. They are not. Furthermore, the same company, the exact same company, UBS, in France, the workers will behave differently than UBS New York. So whatever you're measuring in one country is meaningless in the other. So you understand why this starts to come with a tremendous disaster. Because when we actually look at the company, the rating agency says, to me, the important dimension is labor court complaints, scandals. So if for them, what matters are the scandals, then in the US, UBS behaves like a great company because it almost never get a complaint, and in France, the same company just mistreats the workers. If you measure turnover, then it will look like the same company in the US is a jerk, and it's a beautiful place in France. Not a single person ever is hired, nor ever quits. Total loyalty of the labor force. You understand? So this error, we are going to call that measurement error, okay? That's the measurement. So the indicators that are proxying for the attribute are mistaken, okay? Then the second part is that some rating agencies pay attention to some of these attributes. We have 61 attributes. So the biggest problem that we had was to get the data from the different data providers and equate them. So to make things that are supposed to measure the same attribute. So this is very detailed. For example, greenhouse emissions and non-greenhouse gases, for example. So many different tiny attributes. It happens to be that, for example, Sustainalytics pays very little attention to governance, but for example, VGO pays a lot of attention to governance. So you're paying attention to different attributes. So I don't expect these guys to agree. That we call scope, okay? And then they get the data from each of these ratings in each dimension. What they do is they give you a number between 1 and 100 in each attribute. That's the indicator. Then they take all the indicators and then they form a rating at the end. Is that clear? What we observe, the discrepancy that we observe is on the rating. And it can come because we measure differently, because we have different scope, or because we put different weights. Are you with me? So what we did was to reverse engineer all their data. In fact, they said, we will not give you a rule of aggregation. And I said, well, I have no problem because I have MIT students, okay? So I told the MIT students, I said, MSCI says that you can do it. I heard that if I take this to a Harvard student, they will do it like in 5 seconds. Then the student said, I'll do it for free, professor. Let's kill that bastard. So anyway, they by the way, we reverse engineer this like you have no idea, okay? It's like 95% accuracy. I said, we just got all these reverse engineer. And actually, I published the equations in the paper. Screw you, MSCI. So we actually put the rules in the paper. And for a long time, I said, like, we shouldn't do this. I said, yeah, but this will screw them. Yes, let's do it. No. So my two personalities were saying, like, should I do or should I not? Is that okay? So anyway, but at the end, what is interesting is that because we know this whole set of rules, I can take the data of one rating agency and put it in the equation of the other to understand how much comes from measurement. I can understand what is the contribution of these guys. I can understand the contributions of the weight. And I think that that's the most important, important contribution is not to show the discrepancy, is to show the source or the reasons of the discrepancy. So what I want to do is to show you what the paper's doing, and then just 5 minutes about what we will do next. Okay, so we get that about half, if you want to remember something about this, about half of the mistake, a little bit more than half of the mistake comes from measurement of the indicators. So the indicators at the raw data level are inconsistent, okay? So we have a problem that we are using two different things to measure the same thing, but they don't agree with each other. But then 47, so about half, is because we take the same raw data and we aggregate that raw data differently. So if I give them the exact same data, they still will have 50% disagreement. So what I want to do is to say, well, what is the roadmap? Because we can do, so solving measurement, I'm going to show you how I'm thinking about measurement, and some of my EMBA students that are here from the 2019, they have heard this before. So I will tell you a little bit how we are actually solving part of this. I'll tell you another examples that they probably haven't heard. But this one here is a relatively easy one to solve. Because if I know what matters to you, if I know what Bill cares about, then I should be able to construct an index that reflects the values from Bill. Is that clear? And then it doesn't matter what data provider I get, they should be the same index. It's the same value, okay? So there's something about these rules that I have not said, but let me just say it. So first thing is we need to measure better, okay? We need to actually find how to measure those attributes, how we can actually do it better, but also, and very importantly, we have to be conscious to the fact that different cultures will actually reflect kind of being upset differently, okay? And so we need to actually think much harder. This is not about a simple statistic. It's a difficult statistic to compute. Second one is about the aggregation. When I have the raw data, then how I put it together. So first, I need to understand what are your values. Second, I need to understand what are your trade-offs. And that will allow me to construct an aggregation. Let me give you an example. Some of the things that we are actually doing nowadays is that we are doing a trade-off between attributes that are very inappropriate. Let me give you an example. This was, I told this this morning, so actually Mike has heard this. But I was talking to an extremely, extremely smart group of people that were trying to measure intolerance. What an incredibly difficult thing to do, no? How do you measure intolerance? So they divided this by different type of intolerance. So they had intolerance toward women, intolerance towards foreigners, intolerance toward African Americans, intolerance toward different religious beliefs, and intolerance toward gays or different sexual preferences. Is that clear? And in each one of them, they had this extremely interesting survey and like a little exercise to understand for people to evaluate whether or not they were intolerant toward that dimension. And then they're explaining all of this. By the way, I do know the individual that is constructing this index, so he's telling me, you know, this is more or less how we construct. These are the surveys here. We run the surveys at the level of the firm, at the level of the community. So super interesting, okay? And this is what we have learned. I have all these psychologists that go around and do these interviews. I said, we gave then every firm and every community a rating in each of these dimensions, so intolerance toward each one, and then we just compute a score for all of them, okay, by doing a weighted average. And then say, wait. What is that? I said, well, we just do, he tried to explain, I said, you do a weighted average? So I said, I'm not going to say the name of the person, but so, Bill. So I said, Bill, you have a son, no? And he says, yes. Okay. Imagine that your son comes to you and says, Dad, I want to keep my score constant, so I've decided to treat women better and gay worse. Is that okay? That's what a weighted average does. I'm sorry, it's not the weighted average. It's the minimum. You are as intolerant as the people that you treat the worst. It's not a weighted average. These functions are incredibly complex. But because we like weighted average, because it's the only thing that they taught us on the first semester of the MBA, okay? Because we only learned that, then we continue doing weighted averages all the time. But in the end, it's not a weighted average. Now, in the society, I want you to understand, in the society, we're implicitly making those trade-offs. We're implicitly choosing how much of our effort goes to, good quality of jobs, how much of our effort goes to the environment, how much of our effort goes to immigration, how much of our effort goes to assimilation, how much of our effort goes to greenhouse, etc. We actually make those choices. We actually, as a society, are making a trade-off. We're deciding to put effort and money and resources and attention toward one goal and not toward the other. What that means is that we have an implicit trade-off between these. I computed, to make it super insulting, okay? I computed in every one of these companies how many metric tons of CO2 you can pollute by hiring one woman in the board. I mean, it's super clear. And I said, yeah, obviously these two things are very related, And I did it specifically to signal the fact that it's we shouldn't be actually thinking about these as weighted averages. This is significantly more complex. By the way, we're writing that paper right now. That's the paper we're writing right now, is because I think that this is the place where we can have short gains really fast, where we think about how to use the data that we already have to produce a better indicator. So the research that we're conducting now is to think about how can we actually create these functions that reflects our values. And in fact, when we have the pilot, you will get an email if you want to participate, which is a game. We have a game to understand that you understand what are your trade-offs. So if I give you $10 and I give you two different charities, one that is, for example, for women empowerment and the other one is for CO2, and I ask you, how will you allocate that? By playing that game repeatedly, you will actually tell me what are your preferences. This was done by Paul Samuelson, by the way, a very unknown professor from this building, so from MIT. So truly what we're doing is having a game on an app. And so we will send you an email when the app is ready. It's only about 3 charities, and you just play the game. That will, again, you're contributing to the data. We will never reveal who you are. We will not even ask who you are. Is that okay? But we want to test if that actually is something that we can recover. What are the preferences of a community? In fact, we are going to play that game in our classes, and the idea is to understand what it is. Once we have that, then we can construct a function. We can understand how to aggregate it. By the way, a very difficult problem will be the difference between our individual values and the societal values. So to me, for example, women empowerment is extremely important. Extremely, extremely important. So if you put me a trade-off between women empowerment and, for example, I don't know, health care for everybody, and it's a trade-off that I have to pick one or the other, I almost always pick on women empowerment, not health. Is that clear? Why? Because in my case, I care more about one than the other. But you don't have to agree with me. Is that clear? So the question is, if we don't agree, then how we construct something that is meaningful to all of us? And what is the distance between what we're constructing for all of us and your individual preferences? And that's kind of the purpose of what we're constructing in that one. Let me finish with this. These are the areas that I'm working. So women empowerment is in the number one list. So there's something called mansplaining. Does anyone knows? Raise your hand if you know what mansplaining is, please. Really, really high. Are you sure? Ellen, are you sure you know what mansplaining is? You want me to explain it to you?
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I already did it. Yeah, great. That is exactly mansplaining. This is what.
Skip the second one.
Yeah, household stress is. These are the bad things. I am measuring. I am trying to understand in which conditions you have what is called matricide. Matricide is when there's domestic violence that is so bad that ends up in the husband killing the wife. Yeah. And the two countries where this is the worst are Colombia and Spain. Yes, and I'm working with the district attorneys, equivalent of the district attorneys in each of these countries, to get data from the healthcare system, and this is super confidential data. But I call it household stress, but I am trying to understand when in the probability that this is not one household. This is about 800 households, so it's a relatively small but large group of individuals. And the idea is to understand in which periods of time the stress in those households has gone up and the likelihood of a violent event can increase. And the question is, with that information, then what we should do. So the question is, what should you do with that information? Most of the I talked to law enforcement, so most of the people from law enforcement and the military, they just said, let's go and beat up the guys, okay? Preemptively. And I said, that's what we Italians will do, actually. But the question is, what is the responsibility of that data? But we are at the stage where we want to actually detect. What is incredible is that in Colombia, actually, we know in which towns this is going to happen. We know, and we can see that. And so we have to create this and collect the data fast enough that we can actually have a measure every week. So that's my purpose is to get this on the week. Paula, you have a question? Yeah, mansplaining is, for example, in a meeting, there are many different forms, but in a meeting, for example, when a woman says something, and then she's interrupted, and then a man explains what she was planning to do. Has that ever happened to you? Yeah, never. I mean, that's impossible. In fact, let me explain to all of you how hard it is to be a woman in the labor force of the United States. That's the other one. Okay. In fact, I had once a student tell me that actually happened in a meeting, where she was actually saying how hard it is to have babies and in the labor force of the United States, and then a man interrupted her. Yes, in fact, let me tell you what it is, how it feels. Yeah. Yes. It's actually beautiful, priceless. I would love to have those conversations just to show it to you, but now you know that. So they call it mansplaining. Yes, on the back. Yes.
The rather lengthy and comprehensive list of behaviors you're trying to get a grasp on, I noticed the absence of one that doesn't seem to be getting a lot of media attention either. Suicides among combat soldiers and police. It's a rather troubling phenomenon in our society.
Yes, and in a particular group. So the suicides and sadness is something that Rosalind Picard here at MIT is doing a lot. And she is kind of creating devices like this one to try to predict or try to measure when the person has extreme degrees of sadness. So I wanted to do more general things that have more, look, almost all of these has police officers involved. Okay, all of these are crimes. I'm not saying that suicides are not important. It's just that I kind of, I am more on the enforcement side, okay? So this is just personal choices. And so this is violating a law on water management. This is about violating labor standards. Opioids, of course, is crisis. Human trafficking, I don't have to explain. It's about people for sex or the other one. This is the attribution problem. This is about networks. This is very important for terrorism and for crime, because all of those organizations are in a network, and in fact, one makes the other one better, okay, the existence. So now the way we actually estimate it is by looking at baseball teams. It's the same problem. Because a shortstop will make a second baseman better. And the second baseman will make the pitcher better. Because if they are good fielders, they will actually make the pitcher better. So that means that the quality or the attributes of one makes the other one better. Now translate that to a criminal organization is exactly the same. One node will make the other node better. So because it's very difficult to estimate the data on crime on networks that we don't observe, I was trying to estimate this with the Major League Baseball. And therefore, by then estimating that network and knowing that I succeed there, then we can go and estimate this for law enforcement. And when the people in Major League Baseball told me, they gave me all the data, and they said, you will not be able to do this. I said, well, if you think that I cannot do it, what's the harm done? Just give me the data. The worst that can happen is that I don't succeed. I wasted my time. As a senior faculty at MIT, I mostly am wasting my time. I'm giving talks to really old people. So anyway, so they gave me the data, and actually, we made predictions. We said, this player that has been just in free agency is a bad fit for this team. And this one is a good one, and this is a bad one. So we told them like 10 different fits. By the way, 2 months into the season, it was clear that we nailed it. So then I thought, oh, this is great. I can monetize this. I will go to the Yankees and tell them I have a methodology, and then I tell to the Red Sox and to the Yankees and to the Red Sox, and with that I will sell it $2 trillion, like, Dr. Evil. I have already the haircut of Dr. Evil. So I was thinking about making money. And like, you understand? Like, I'm in a business school. So then Major League Baseball said, sorry, we will just not allow you to get access to the data. So they took the data out. So I went to the Federal Reserve. And I said, well, we can estimate the network in the financial system. And again, think about it. Every node is a bank. And a shock to Bank of America will have an impact in UBS, and the UBS will have an American Express, and so on. It will propagate in the network. And the health of one bank will improve the health of the other financial institution. So we got this super confidential data from the Fed, and then we estimated that on the Fed. So at the end, the paper will be written with Fed data, even though I wanted criminal behavior. But you see, like everything in life is just a circle. I started with criminal behavior, and I ended in the financial system. And I have Goldman Sachs there, so you can choke. So, but these are the things that I'm working on. Okay, yes?
Maybe really what the most popular measure is, but one particularly popular one is greenhouse emission.
Yes.
So carbon, that seems to be one that has been embraced wildly. Can you just comment on your comfort with that? And
so that is self-reported. One of the problems is the data source. How do I know what are the greenhouse emissions of a firm? And mostly what happens is that they self-report the greenhouse emissions. Now, two, when they report some number that is very high, these organizations come and tell them, you're very dirty. And in fact, they are much better than that. They tell you, they are very dirty, you're very dirty, and that plant that you have in Alabama is the super dirty one. So they actually point to the asset that is very dirty. So what does the companies do? By the way, this is a very famous paper by a professor in Princeton. Once you are given that statement, what happens is that the company sells the unit. So they sell the unit to a private equity. So now it's a private firm, so they don't have to disclose. Not only that, to maximize the price of selling, I sign a 10-year commitment, a contract that I will purchase 100% of their production, because if they actually are going to sell their crap to me, for sure, that increases the value that the private equity will buy for that firm. So the firm gets out of my balance sheet, gets into the balance sheet of a private equity. They don't have to disclose. My CO2 and my greenhouse emissions goes down like crazy because now I'm clean. So you understand how this works, We need to have measurement. It's like everyone has to report taxes. That's how you get the real taxes. If you voluntarily report taxes, it will be only the people that are from Sweden that live here will ever report taxes. This is the only country on earth where people voluntarily pay higher taxes. Any other human being will not pay taxes. I mean, I hate paying taxes. I am a Venezuelan. I am genetically designed to avoid tax payments. Is that okay? Not only that, my dad was from Italy. So you imagine 2 genes forcing me not to ever pay taxes. And then, you don't pay taxes voluntarily. You don't declare, revenues and expenses voluntarily. You have to report, and they have to be audited. So there's a whole set of procedures in the financial system. We need the same set of accounting standards for environment and for everything that it has to do with our ethical behavior. We need to have much better reporting, and I think that's the only solution. Any other questions? Yes.
So it sounds like a lot of your analysis is a function of values and of particular causes. What causes do people or companies prioritize, or investors? What do they prioritize? How are you also accounting for the fact that different tactics have different impacts in terms of their ability to remedy those causes?
So that's a very, very good question. So it's and especially in some of these, like human trafficking, for example, there will be very different tactics, very, very different ones. I am trying, I am at the very early stages where I just want to know how many we have, at what price they are traded on the dark web, and to understand if law enforcement has any impact in that market. So I don't want to overstate what I do, okay? So I will answer that question if you promise me to ask me another question. Is that clear? Are you with me? It has to be that you ask me another question because this is super depressing. So what we do is we go to the dark web 4 times a day, and what is called web scrape. That means that we have a picture of everything that happens on the dark web every single day, 4 times a day. So every transaction that takes place in the dark web, we observe. Okay? We don't do that at MIT. Well, we do that in the MIT Lincoln Lab, okay? So, but we don't do this with the computers here. We do other things here in the computers, and in fact, the poor guys downstairs have a nightmare. Is that okay? Because we connect to super inappropriate web pages, all of them super illegal. Every time my students come to the office, we have to close the door, and because we're going to be seeing things that are super inappropriate. All my computer is full of millions of viruses that you have no idea. In fact, a lot of times I just to get the computer, just throw it, burn it, because it's just destroyed. It is destroyed because you are in an environment where people are incredibly sophisticated. We are good, but we're not that good. So we lose a lot of our assets. But by looking at that, I can know what is the price that criminals pay for every human being depending on their activity. If the human being is going to be used in a fishery, it's a price. If they're going to be used for example, deforestation, there's a different price. If it's going to be used in a nail salon, it's a different price. If it's for sex, it will be a different price. So people do trade that, and they actually sell human beings on the web. They sell organs. It looks exactly like Amazon.com or eBay. Exactly. So this is what people are trading. And what I do is I collect the prices, I collect the quantities, and I construct an index. Because if law enforcement is being effective in affecting the supply, then there has to be an impact on the quantities and the prices. If they are good at affecting the demand, there will be a different impact on quantities. And so this is super basic. But we are trying to see if there's an effect. If things happen, for example, I love sports, but to be honest, with this research, it has become harder and harder and harder for me to love sports. Really, really hard. Really, really hard. So what we find is in New York alone, there are about 7,000 girls between the ages of 15 and 17, those are all minors, that are offered for prostitution. About 7,000, a little bit less than that. When there's a sport event, like a Super Bowl, 1,000 of those girls suddenly appear in Minneapolis or in Atlanta. 1,000. They move around. By the way, the worst event is Final Four. It's the worst event. Actually, I don't watch Final Four ever again. I know it's super entertaining, but I can't. Because, I mean, somehow I'm supporting this behavior. So one of the things that we are doing here at MIT, by the way, is with the MIT students, we are creating something that tracks these movements of the, by the way, 95% are girls, okay? There's very few boys, or we don't find them. But we are tracking what is happening to these girls, where they are, where they're going. And I want to tell people in the world that this is happening in the sport events. Like a convention, a business convention. I want people to know. Just transparency. You're a bastard and I got you, okay? Period. By the way, another thing that I do is to compute the profits, to understand the size of the market. So for example, in human trafficking, all human trafficking, the profits every year are between 120 and 150 billion dollars. Let me rephrase that. That's 3 times, sorry, Apple. The most profitable company on earth is a loser in comparison to human trafficking, because you pay almost nothing for a human being and then you actually produce. So to me, it's a lot about awareness at the moment and try to detect what activity. So for example, it is the case that if you see a shrimp, okay, in the supermarket that has been deveined, you know when they're clean, deveined, cut, and then deshelled, for example, there's about 15 to 30% chance that that was produced by someone doing forced labor. So you know what? Buy your shrimps super dirty. We can afford it. They're more expensive, and it's a pain to clean them. So what I do is when my kids are visiting home, I buy 2 pounds of shrimp, and I tell my son, clean that, you bastard! And my son says, this is forced labor. Yeah, it's called parenting. Build some character, you miserable bastard. And then he's just cleaning and the hands are bleeding. So it is, let me end with a joke because otherwise, but I want to make that known. I want to make known that people that buy certain type of clothing, they have a certain livelihood of supporting an activity that is abusive. And if we make that publicly available, we have a chance that you will be outraged. Is that clear? I need you to be super upset so you decide, I am not buying this anymore. No, unacceptable. Because when you decide not anymore, then the profits of this activity will go down to 0. Do you understand $150 billion? Let's assume that law enforcement doubles the cost of that. It will move from 150 to what? 120? I mean, like, still I want to do the activity 20 times. It's too profitable. So, and again, it's just very difficult to stop the cycle. So I want to create awareness. A lot of that this is about awareness. This is about awareness as well. It's where it's likely to happen. This I want to change culture. And for that one, what we do is we record people. So we are doing this with Sandy Petland. And what we do is we have to change this, okay? The way we did it is not, I mean, we have to do this better, okay? But the way we did it was to put a microphone on individuals and record. And then, we measure the interruptions, okay? So I go and said, what is your name, Carla? Carla. So I said, oh, Carla, that was a fantastic participation. Can you say it again?
Carla.
Exactly. Good. Oh, my God. That was so good. Anyway, so at the beginning when we put the microphones, people are behaving like super, super nice, okay? Like, yeah, they're super nice. But then MIT, takes over, and the inner jerk comes like an alien, okay? From the end, and then people start behaving, they jerk themselves, and then they start interrupting each other, and it's beautiful. And what happened is that, for example, depending on the nationality, men have different patterns of interruptions. So for example, German, Dutch, Japanese, they tend to interrupt very infrequently. All the Nordics also tend to interrupt very infrequently. And one of the reasons is that in their language, the content of the sentence is kind of at the end of the sentence. So sky blue is not. I mean, so you have to wait. No? Sky blue is. Oh, good day. Yeah, I mean, like it just takes a while. I mean, you have to wait, no? So truly, the same in Japanese. In Japanese, it will be wakarimasu, wakarimasu ka, wakarimasen. So when I say the word wakari, you have no idea what I'm saying. Now, those three phrases means, do you understand? Yes, I understood. No, I didn't understand. So you understand that in English, it's impossible to actually, these three sentences will be different on the first sound. So I can interrupt you right immediately. And if you're talking to an Italian, the Italian, just by looking at your face, they know. Yeah, is that okay? So in fact, I have a recording. We have a recording. We had to raise that recording. It was such a beautiful recording. I think that did I tell the story about the German and the Italian in your class, Chris? You remember? But anyway, this is just a fantastic, fantastic recording. I had to erase it because the protection of privacy, all that crap, okay? I mean, if I were in Facebook, I would put this in YouTube. Anyway. But this is an Italian talking to a German. By the way, the one that interrupt the most are the Italians. Then comes the Spanish and all the Latinos. In the middle, you have the Asians and Americans and so on. So we are all spread in the distribution of interruptions. So this is an Italian talking to the German, and the Italian says, well, we have agreed yesterday that in the presentation, Bill is going to go first, and then it's going to be Catherine, and then I will speak last. And then Bill, the German, makes a noise. I'm telling you, it was just a noise. It was not a word. It was not a letter. It was like, something like that. And then immediately the Italian said, oh my God, Bill, you're so unprofessional. Yesterday we had agreed that we were going to talk first. Now you want to change all the conditions. I don't understand why you can do that. You are such a rascal. You are a jerk. And then Bill makes not a word, still a louder, longer noise. And then the Italian switches to Italian and starts insulting the mother, the grandmother, the kids, the dog. He insults the whole family. And then the German explodes and says, I agree with you. There's a silence, and the Italian says, well, with that face, how could I tell? You have to tell. This is impossible to write. Is that okay? So, now, the amazing thing about this is that every man, independently of their interruption, interrupted women 4 times more than men. By the way, between 4 and 7. 4 is the lower bound. Between 4 and 7 times more women than men. So I always tell people that I am from Venezuela, my dad is Argentinian, my grandfather is Italian, my mother is Spanish, so I belong to the group of interrupters. I don't see anything wrong with interrupting. Nothing wrong, to be honest. Because I think that I will end the sentence, you have no idea what you're saying. Is that okay? So let me interrupt you right away. I don't see, but I do feel differently if I'm interrupting women more than men. Good. I think. Yes.
Sorry, that slipped out.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. And what is truly amazing, what happens to the MIT students, which is actually the extraordinary aspect, is when I tell them that statistic, the immediate thing that happened is in the classroom, people apologizes. Immediately. And immediately, so Catherine, if I did that, I'm sorry. Please, next time I do it, let me know. That's unacceptable. So first, it is an extraordinary aspect that truly what we call unconscious bias is truly, to me, unmeasured activity. Because most people will not be proud of that behavior. I understand that there will be 5% of jerks, which are impossible to stop. Is that clear? I will not be able to change, let's say, 10% of the world population, but the other 90 will be ashamed of that behavior. Now, we repeat it because we're in an environment that is so permissive that we just do it all the time. And then the women accept it all the time. There's an exercise that I do in my class that is super depressing, super depressing, but I think it's a very good teaching moment for me. when we're discussing a case, what I do is I point to someone, okay, so Bill, and then when Bill say something, then Bill chooses who's the next person to speak, okay? And then that one chooses the next one, and then the next one. Is that okay? So I choose only the first one, and then it just goes bouncing. Interesting statistic. Men call on men. This is adjusted by the number of hands that are up. And my TAs are writing like crazy. People think that they are collecting your comments. They are not. They are not. They don't care what you say. Whatever you say in class is usually crap, okay? So there's no value added of reporting that. So I know that whatever you say is going to be useless in class. So I don't care what you say. They are just counting how many men, how many women are raising their hands, and then how many times the men call on men, the men on women, and the women on men, women on women. Interestingly, men call on men about 80% frequency. And women call on men about 75% frequency, 70% frequency. Which, you know what happens in the class when I do this exercise? At the beginning, all the women raise their hand. By the third class, will you even raise your hand? Why bother? Why bother? And this is me starting, like Natalia. I actually point to a woman first, and it takes 2 or 3 calls, and then it's full men, only men talking. Because the women don't even dare to raise their hands. Why bother? Interestingly, I tell them on the third class what they're doing, and immediately they start counting. It's so beautiful. It's beautiful. They need to develop something to check. And what they do, you can see them that they're writing men, women, men, women. So my turn, women. And they're looking, anyone? And then immediately you change the dynamics. Truly, you change the dynamics completely. Now, I don't know how to measure that electronically, so I don't know how to do that. But in our teams, in our meetings inside the companies, this happens all the time. Catherine, you agree with me? So I don't know how to actually operationalize this. Is that clear? But what is truly amazing is that when you tell individuals their behavior, they dramatically change. Instantaneously. I would say that instantaneously they change. And the most beautiful aspect, by the way, the most beautiful aspect is the apology. They start with an apology. In fact, even when the data is not about them, they start with an apology, which is great. Because that means that people recognize that there's a bad environment and you can change the hostility of the environment. We just need to provide the right measure. It cannot be once a year, okay? It cannot be once a year. It cannot be only extreme outcomes. Will I change the way people behave in a bar? No, I will not. This will never change the way people behave in a bar, but we have the chance to change people that behaves inside the organizations. Let me just end with this. 100%, yes, let me just say, 100% of this research, 100% of this research is financed by MIT alumni. 100%. More than 18 years has been financed, all this research entirely with people like you. Why? Because I don't want to imagine that I succeed. Just imagine that I succeed and I can predict household violence. Do you want me to be monetizing that? Or do you want this to provide to the world for free? It's the second one. So I need to do this in a way that whenever we succeed, that we share. And we share without boundaries, without cost, without judgment. It is important that we do that. This is a research that is very multidisciplinary, but it's bad in every discipline. So this is research that you use a computer scientist, and it will be a bad paper in that area. Uses economics, and it will be a bad paper in economics. Uses psychology, and will be a bad paper in psychology. Uses statistics, and it will be a bad paper in statistics. Because these type of papers do not comply with the way academic research is somewhat rewarded. So who's going to do it if it's not us? Are we going to wait for someone that has the wrong incentives to do that? So for those of you that have helped me in the last 18 years, thank you. And for those that you will help me in the future, because I do need resources, thank you as well. But this is actually, these are the things that actually we as MIT have not only the ability, but the responsibility to do. This is truly what makes us so different from any other place, is that when we are called to action, we, in general, always are there, always, especially when they are fair and just causes. And there's nothing more fair than giving people similar treatment, than giving individuals the chance to be found, to give people that are actually be saved. Just to give you one idea, one single entity on the human trafficking, one of the kids, I made a joke in one of the, and by the way, now you understand why I joke about everything in life. Because if I have to subject myself to this, you know, it is. By the way, all the analysts and all the people that work in this area, I always thank them every day because they are giving us their psychological health for us. All the law enforcement, I mean, these are horrible things. And people, you know, they do the best that they can. There's only one analyst in the whole city of San Francisco for human trafficking that works only 1 day of the 5 for human trafficking on sex. So 1/5 of a person in the whole city of San Francisco. 2 people in the whole city of New York. Why? Because this is not something that the people know about it. There's no reward. So they rely on us. So in one of the meetings, you know, the district attorney is saying that we only get very bad witnesses in human trafficking, that we do not find good witnesses because usually the girl that has been abused is a very bad witness when you put them in a court, okay? They have been manipulated. It's very difficult for them to point to the person that actually just abused her. This doesn't happen, okay? And remember, this is a minor also. So it's just a horrible, horrible vicious cycle. So the district attorney said, we need to find good witnesses. And I said, no, we need to find 7 bad ones. 7 bad ones. Because maybe with 7 bad ones, we get one good one. And, you know, they all laugh and stuff like that. And then one kid actually listened. He went to Afghanistan because he was working in the military. And from there, he sends a program that actually was able to find all the friends from the girl that was being abused. Those are your 7 bad ones. Just to give you an idea, before this kid, the district attorney of New York only processed 30 cases a year with only 10% conviction rate. There are more than 1,000 pimps. He was processing 30 with only 3 going to jail a year. Is that clear how pathetic that is? After the program from this kid, 3 years ago, or maybe 2 years ago, I don't remember exactly the data, 380 cases with 85% conviction rate. We get the bastards out of there. We got the 7 bad witnesses. So this is incredibly rewarding from that sense. This paper will never be public. How can I make this public? How can I tell people how we catch them? This will never be written. The results will never be known. But we are catching the bad people. So thank you for all of that, and thank you for all the support, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Roberto, for being with us tonight and sharing all of this amazing work with us. It is a pleasure and an honor to come to work every day and work with people like Roberto and having this impact in the world. As many of you have probably heard, that the campaign theme is creating a better world, and so being around people like Roberto really feels like living that every day. So what would an MIT event be without a little bit of homework? So I ask in the next day, if you heard something tonight that's new to you or that makes you proud, I hope that you'll share it with other MIT people and with other people in your lives, because that really is how the word gets out. In the next week, we will continue the conversation. We have a virtual program highlighting one of our fabulous alumni doing work in urban innovation in Northern California. And so that's on Thursday. We'll send that out in the follow-up information. And then I hope over the next month, from the information that Roberto has shared tonight, this really is funded through the annual fund. We're running a challenge funded by Judy Luent. It is kicked off this month, and it is impacting 7 areas of research in the school, and Roberto's is one of them. So I hope you'll consider making a gift to that. Thank you for being here tonight, and I look forward to the follow-on dessert reception. Take care.